Hello everybody, welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party.
We are truly honored that you're here. The fact that we have listeners, the fact that people subscribe is honestly just an honor. Like Elijah and I just feel so blessed that we get to be a part of your lives.
So thank you.
Thank you.
To all of you that subscribe and that follow and that listen. We hope that what we share with you actually benefits your life.
We hope. Yeah. And honestly, we would love to get to know you guys. Mm-hmm. And the way we feel like we can do that is so you can comment, you can email us. You know, we'd love to hear ideas and just hear from you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We love ideas. We love book recommendations.
Yes.
We will read them.
Yeah.
And we will talk about them. So if there's anything that you would like us to speak about, like, please share it with us, email us, comment, do all the good things.
Like, we love to read, and it would be super fun to, it'd be really cool to do a podcast based on what you guys want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'd love to cater to you guys. Okay, so let's jump into today.
The party.
Let's jump into our party today. So I'm actually really excited about this because it's almost been a year now, but I like in my own self-discovery and journey, there's been this question that I've asked Elijah a bunch of times and that I've actually asked a lot of people, and I think I should tell a story to preface the question. Yeah. So I think in life we find ourselves that there's relationships that are crucial that we want to keep. You know, it could be close family, close friends. You know, maybe you want to have a really good relationship in a business venture endeavor. There's relationships that we want to keep close to us. Mm-hmm. And that's a really great thing. But, you know, inevitably these relationships are going to take work. And within these close relationships, you're always going to find yourself in sticky situations. That's just life. I don't think not necessarily sticky, but I think that's...
I would say more tricky.
Tricky. Okay, I think that's a better...
More difficult to navigate than you anticipated with friends, family members, like Meg said, business colleagues, co-workers, whatever it is.
Yeah, so I had a relationship in my life, and I was really struggling with it. And I really didn't want to, but I really was. And so I think my question was just how do I deal with this person? How do I have conversations with this person? How do I foster a relationship with this person when this person is really hard for me to deal with? And I don't think that's mean to say. I think that's okay. I think that's life.
That is life. And there's relationships out there that you really want to foster and improve upon that might be really difficult. People might struggle with their parents, people might struggle with siblings, but those are relationships that, at least in our life, that we want to keep.
Right.
We want to keep those relationships alive, even though some of them might be harder than others.
Yeah. So I was in this situation where I had this relationship and I really felt like it was worth saving, but I found myself in a really tricky spot. Mm. And I think the biggest thing that was happening is this is a relationship that I really wanted, but I was harboring so much resentment. And as I was preparing for this podcast, I actually was reflecting in my life. And I think this was a huge weakness that I think I've had my whole life that I'm really trying to overcome. And it's that when I feel like I've been wronged, I have a really hard time not harboring resentment. Mm-hmm. And I think this is pretty common because I've read it in countless books. A lot of every self-help author I've discovered so far has expressed that before you can really start your life and start your ventures, you have to rid yourself of resentment. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how. I just kept hearing you need to rid yourself of resentment, but I just I didn't understand how. And so all of this is to say this podcast is an attempt for me to explain some of the ideas that I gleaned from books and just from experience that have helped me to rid my heart of resentment.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things that all the self-help gurus out there speak about is what Meg said is ridding your heart of resentment, and that in turn includes forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right? They're kind of one in the same.
Yes.
It's rid your heart of resentment. In other words, forgive.
Yes.
Right? And so that's one of the major points that we're going to even speak about today, is just how you can get to that point, even though somebody might have wronged you, in a very real and hurtful and, quite frankly, in some instances, people don't really deserve forgiveness.
Yes.
But it's more for you than it is for them. And so that's really what we're going to speak about today, is just how to rid yourself of resentment. And that, in turn, is through forgiveness.
Yes. I think the first thing I wanted to speak about is, first of all, we're all going to be wronged and hurt by people.
Yeah.
That's life. But
it's inevitable.
And on the flip side, intentionally or not, you're going to wrong and hurt other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like one of the first things that kind of helped me is, I think the relationships that I have that are closest to me, I would say the majority of them aren't out to like get me.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the first thing that I actually had to learn. And this came from a principle from the book Crucial Conversations. You read it in college because
I read
it had
it for
to
one of my
do with
classes.
and then you recommended me reading. Anyways, so the first thing that I actually repeat in my head a lot now is, there's this idea in Crucial Conversations, and if somebody's doing something that's just like ruffling your feathers and making you like really upset, you can say to yourself, okay, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do this? And in the moment, it's really hard because at least in my head, I'm like, well, they're not reasonable, rational, or decent. They're the worst. They're Satan themselves. But if you can kind of calm down, you can kind of think, okay, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do this?
Yeah.
And as soon as you like label them as such, then I feel like it's easier to engage in conflict or to address, the resentment that you could find building in your heart.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Like, as soon as you take a step back and take a deeper breath and you start to understand, for example, I'll just use parents as an example, not because my parents are garbage people or anything.
I love them.
But because it's just a really easy example that I think everybody can relate to. Parents can be the worst when you're a teenager.
Yes.
Absolute worst. And at the end of the day, I can genuinely say, at least for my parents, and I'm pretty sure for the majority of, for all good parents out there, they can say the same thing. They want what's best for their children. They want you to succeed, they want you to excel, they want you to grow, they want you to learn and progress. Now, as a teenager, you think that they're the worst human being in the world and that they're just like keeping you from being your authentic self and having fun and everything. But if you actually, as a teenager, take a step back and take a deep breath, every single time your parents are actually striving for what is best for you, and it's because they are a reasonable, rational person and very decent. But at the time, it might just be that it seems like they aren't. Now, once you get a little older and that you start to progress in terms of business relationships or even more mature relationships, you'll come to find that things are a little trickier.
Yeah.
And that people aren't really striving to be irrational, but things get a little tricky when money is involved or when feelings and emotion are involved. But I think that's what the great thing is about even this crucial conversation, is that it is telling you to take a step back, take a deep breath, assess the situation, and then you can come at it with a clear head. And I think it makes it a lot easier moving forward. Just
last week, we were in a tricky situation. It was just more confusing. You'll know. I don't want to name names.
Yeah.
But we were in this situation, and there was like some paperwork that was just super confusing.
So weird.
And we couldn't figure out what was going on. And I tell this story too because
it's a perfect example, actually.
It's a great example, but it's also a leeway into another principle I'm excited to share. So, anyways, we were all sitting there and we're all scratching our heads like, what is going on? Now, I want to preface it too. The character of the people that we were working with, they have stellar character. They are amazing.
People of integrity.
Honest
people.
Honest, good
all the good
people.
things.
But like there was this paperwork, and it just like did not match anything that they stood for and all of the prior actions that we've been, involved with them. And so what Elijah and I actually did is we took a step back and we're like, okay, like.
Because it actually really frustrated me more than it did Meg, and she pulled the principles from Crucial Conversations And that's what actually put it into a better perspective.
Because I was like, okay, they are so reasonable, they're so rational, and they're very good people. So, like, why would they be doing it? And as soon as we said that, we were like, okay, well...
We went through what they were actually going through currently in their lives.
We pulled the facts we knew.
They just had some personal issues that they had to take care of. And as soon as we pulled those facts, it was like, oh, that's what's going on.
Okay, so maybe we'll just have to readdress this when it's just the right time in their personal life.
Absolutely.
So this story kind of comes to the next principle, and this one's actually like kind of revolutionized my thinking.
Yeah.
So habitually, as people, Crucial Conversations explains that we all tell stories. In our human minds, we want to make sense of every experience we go through. And unfortunately, the habit is kind of to tell stories for the worse. For example, if someone hurts you, normally you'll tell a story in your head. You're trying to make meaning of why they hurt you. And you're like, well, they're just horrible. They're super mean. They're selfish. I know they did this. I know they did that. And in this situation we had with this paperwork, that's kind of what was happening.
Sorry.
No, jump in.
The one thing I would like to say, I think a very easy way to understand this is, for example, if a friend blows you off.
Okay, this is good.
If a friend blows you off or brushes you off, immediately you start to think to yourself, did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? What did I do? Like, they must hate me. And then you start creating this story in your mind as to why they just kind of brushed you off and didn't have a conversation with you. When in reality, they might be dealing with stresses of life, stresses with work, stresses with whatever, and they didn't even think, oh my gosh, I'm blowing my friend off. They were just thinking of everything else that they had to deal with currently. And so then it's kind of funny because then as soon as you go and actually have a conversation with them, 9 times out of 10, they're like, I'm so sorry I blew you off the other day. I was dealing with this, and this was the problem. And then the full story comes into fruition, right? But that is usually what we do, is if something slightly negative or that's slightly off with somebody that we care about and that they're not at 100% like they normally are.
Our mind jumps to
and
the
they just jump down to like 90%, not even like 50 or 20. Immediately we just assume the worst, and that couldn't be farther from the case.
Right.
You know, it's just that story that we create in our mind.
Yes, and it's been interesting because ever since I read this book, like I'll be in a situation and I find myself starting to create some story about why I think someone's doing something.
Whatever. Yeah.
And what's interesting is when we start building these stories, we start feeling emotions. And that's good, but it's also really dangerous.
Yeah.
Because, you know, let's say Elijah like blew me off and maybe he was like hiding a present or something for my birthday. But I come up with a story that he like hates me, that like he doesn't want to hang out with me, and I'm like super, super mad at him, but it turns out he's doing something nice for me. But then I'm mad about something that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And I feel like that happens a lot in conflict, or, you know, when you have this resentment. Sometimes our resentment is built off of like these stories that aren't even true.
There's actually a story that I read, and I think I've shared it on this podcast before, but it applies directly into this, and it's about this woman who was married to this very prestigious businessman. He was very, very successful at a young age, and what happened was she found in his suit pocket a receipt for a motel locally.
Yeah.
And so she was furious, and she shows up at the motel. She followed him to work one day, and he ends up going to the motel, and he comes out of the motel, and she's in the parking lot just bawling her eyes out. And he comes and like gently knocks on the window. He's like, hey, what's going on? She's like, I followed you to work and I've been following you all day and I can't believe you're cheating on me. And he goes, sweetheart, why would you assume I'm cheating on you? She's like, I found this, and pulls out the receipt to the motel. And he's like, you found the receipt for the laundromat? He's like, I just got my suit dry cleaned. The cashier works a motel
and a laundromat
and a dry cleaning business, and so his information wasn't working for his dry cleaning business. It was only working for the motel, so he just rang me up on the motel. You know, and that's what we're talking about, the danger behind creating these stories and just going through the worst scenario possible. But in reality, it's like, oh, there's a logical explanation
Yes.
for this if you just give it time, take a step back, and really just work through it. And even just asking the person directly.
Yes. Like, what did you really mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, that happens all the time.
Yes.
With you and I.
Yes.
It's like, hey, I know you probably didn't mean to hurt my feelings, but like...
What?
You 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even...
That's not even what I
I'm
meant.
so sorry.
Yes. Okay, that kind of leads into the next thing. So, I think a lot of times, okay, so this is something I would do, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And it's another principle I learned from the book. If somebody broke my trust in a specific area, I would just blanketly punish them as untrustworthy. So I would. Like, I'd be like, they're just untrustworthy and I'm never going to trust them again in anything because they've proven they're distrustful. Now, I will say there are some times, where trust is broken. And there are very extreme cases where, yeah, that person is proven.
Well, I will say this just real quick. You can rid your heart of resentment and truly forgive somebody and still feel that you should not trust them or have a relationship with them. And that is completely okay.
Yes.
In extreme situations,
yes.
in extreme circumstances. But on the flip side, like Meg
on
was
the
talking
flip
about,
side, someone would break my trust in a small way, and I would be like, they're just untrustworthy, and I'm never going to trust them with anything again. And that just like...
That's also not the right thing to
That's
do
also
in
not the right
most
thing.
situations.
And I would use it as a punishment in a sense where it's like, well, I can't do this, this, and this with this person because I just can't trust them. And what Crucial Conversations explained is just because someone has broken your trust in one area doesn't make them this like blanketly untrustworthy person. Just because maybe someone didn't return your book doesn't mean that you can't trust them, in any other area. I'm trying to think of a good example.
I think a good example of this would even be with childhood friends, or even, for example, when I was in college, I had a friend that would never pay me back, ever. He never paid me back. I would buy him food, I would buy him clothes, I would buy him everything, and he'd always be like, dude, I got you. He never once paid me back. So what I came to the conclusion, I'm just never going to buy him anything again because he never paid me back. But I still loved this person. I still trusted this person. If I called him and I needed something, I could rely on this person. But I just knew when it came to money, I'm not going to trust him.
That's a perfect example. So it's like you don't have to trust someone who's clearly not going to pay you back. You don't have to trust them again.
You don't have to give them money.
But you also don't have to resent them forever and just blanketly label them as a distrustworthy person.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that I like to do in the heat of the moment. I don't know, because
it's just easier.
I don't know. It's just easier to be mad and to find fault.
Yeah.
Okay, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is kind of jumping into, so you have a tricky situation and you know that you have to engage in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a couple things to ask yourself and be mindful of as you're engaging in the situation. And what's interesting is, I think we've said this a lot in podcasts, but of course, in this crucial conversation, it really has nothing to do with the other person. No. And it has everything to do with how you are going to carry yourself and how well you know yourself. Mm. So, when conversations get crucial, we all know it. When you're in a conversation and things are heated, like you can feel the tension and you can feel, even your blood pressure, your heartbeat rising.
Absolutely.
Like, human beings usually have two tendencies. And the first one is silence, and the second one is violence. Mm-hmm. So obviously silence is when people feel the conversation getting crucial, they'll just shut down and not engage.
Yep.
Or, on the latter, they'll turn violent, which is actually...
Be very aggressive.
They'll be very aggressive,
intense,
they'll call names.
Stomp their foot, slam doors.
I'm just really disclosing myself, but that's okay because I'm trying to be better. Personally, I will turn to violence. If I am upset with you, I will go for your jugular and try to really hurt you, even if that's not my intention. It could be I'm just trying to figure something out and trying to have a conversation, but the second it gets crucial, I have this really bad habit of immediately going violent and trying to hurt somebody verbally, and that's not okay.
Right.
But I think now knowing that, I can, just recognizing it is going to help me a lot.
100%. So I had the advantage of taking a class on this, and I took a lot of different classes on like conflict management, conflict resolution. Conflict resolution, and it helped me dramatically in my relationships, and it's been pretty cool to see just kind of how I can react or respond to relationships and crucial conversations. And it's pretty crazy because you can see a huge shift in silence or violence, or now when you enter a conversation, it is just complete calmness, and you're at peace, and you're able to like go into a conversation and truly have a conversation and not just scream at each other.
Because yes, and
because you
know yourself.
And that's what we're talking about, is trying to work towards that point. You know, I mean, for example, in a crucial conversation that you may be having, you'll start to notice the signs of it getting heated. If your palms start to sweat, if you start to get a little nervous, if your temperature starts to rise, those are just some signs and to indicate that you are now getting more and more heated. And what's great is that we each can know ourselves on a very personal level, so that we can know when that's happening, and then you can take those countermeasures to figure out how to calm down.
Yes, which kind of goes into the next principle I really liked, and it's asking yourself, like, what do I really want out of this?
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is a huge mistake I made in the past. I've engaged in crucial conversations, and I'll just go off on some tangent because I'm so upset that I can't even that I'm not even talking about what I really want.
Just see red.
Yes, and what the whole point of this whole conversation is about. So I think, I mean, if you can, like, prior to the conversation, like, think through, okay, like, what do I really want? Why am I engaging in this? What is the purpose of this? It also helps you to remain calm because, you know, when you watch another person get silent or get violent or, you know, start to tense up, you don't have to, because you know what you want out of the situation. And what you can help do is you can help the other person express what they want, and then you can invent a mutual purpose.
And that's the key right there.
That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that is a principle that actually Stephen Covey really recommends, Mr. Crucial Conversation recommends, even Norman Vincent Peale in Power of Positive Thinking. If you can synergize or invent a mutual purpose or come to an agreement, find common ground with a person, then, you know, the sky's the limit. And you really can come out of these situations with zero resentment and in a place where you both come out as winners. And I think that's just so amazing.
No, I would agree with that. I even look back at it, some of the, we had a tiff, I should say, with our previous landlords, and the conversation went from us trying to discuss the contract and what we thought was fair and what they thought was fair, to their dogs being a nuisance, to them thinking that we're just screwing them over. Like, there was a million different things. It went so many different directions that we didn't have a common purpose at all. And that common purpose was like, hey, we just want to be honest, we want you to be honest, and we want to be fair in all of this. And then it just went sideways real quick. And so that's really what we're trying to focus on, is if you're able to invent that mutual purpose with these individuals that you might be harboring resentment towards, you're able to rid yourself of that resentment and just better your life overall.
Yeah. So those are some of the principles that I found have really helped me to, like, clear my mind and get resentment out of my heart, because it really was a habit. Like, I would literally be in the shower or doing some task during the day, and I would just, my mind would go straight to, like, the resentful feelings I had for people, and I just so wanted this gone because it was super, super toxic.
Yeah.
And actually Norman Vincent Peale just expresses that, you know, like, in order to harness, like, your creative energy and just, like, enthusiasm and zest in life, you have to get rid of this.
Yeah.
And I just, like, so desperately wanted to know how. So those are some of the ways that, like, I was able to do so.
Yeah.
And you had a couple things you wanted to share too.
Yeah, there's a couple insights that I have. So there's a famous series on Apple TV. It's called Ted Lasso.
Woohoo!
It's about this American football coach who goes to England and he becomes a British football coach, which is soccer in America. And there was one interaction that his teammates had. One teammate basically schooled the other teammate in one of the practice rounds. And he called the teammate over that gets schooled, and he goes, "Hey, do you know what the happiest animal on earth is?" And the teammate just sits there and he goes, "It's a goldfish." He goes, "A goldfish has a 10-second memory." And then he says, "Be a goldfish." And so I think that is huge when it comes to resentment and forgiveness for the minor things.
Yes.
Right? When it comes to minor issues, minor details, petty little arguments and tiffs and discussions, be a goldfish, have a 10-second memory, move on, because that is just going to hinder your progress more and more. People are going to bother you all the time in this life, and it's going to be little petty things every single day. But if you're able to just have that 10-second memory like a goldfish, you're not going to let the small things bother you, and it'll be that much easier to let the big things go too. And so then the second thing I wanted to say is it's more in relation to forgiveness. And Zig Ziglar speaks about this woman, and this gets pretty real here, so bear with me. This woman was sexually abused as a little girl by her stepfather, and something very, very difficult to deal with, very, very heart-wrenching to deal with. And quite frankly, one of those situations that somebody doesn't really deserve forgiveness. But he was speaking about forgiveness in a speech, and she heard it. And he said, "You cannot move on in this life. You will never live up to your full potential until you truly, earnestly forgive others of what they have wronged you of." And so she immediately thought about her stepdad, who she had not seen since she was 16. This girl was in her 30s now. And then she eventually goes to a payphone and calls him and says, "Look, what you did to me was incredibly wrong. It should have never happened." She goes, "But I want you to know that I forgive you and that I love you." And her stepfather just wept. He just broke down in tears and felt, one, ashamed for his actions, but two, like that a weight had been lifted on his shoulders because he had felt remorse for years for his actions, right? But here's the tricky thing about forgiveness too. Forgiveness is very dangerous, because as soon as you rid your heart of resentment and forgive somebody else, you are now saying, "I am taking full responsibility for my life going forward, and I am never going to blame that person again, no matter how hard or how difficult they may have wronged me." And so those are the two things that I would mention, is just, one, be a goldfish for the petty things. And when it comes to the big things, you really do need to forgive and move on, even though it may be difficult and it might be so hard, and they might not deserve your forgiveness. But at the end of the day, it's more for you than it is for them. It's more for you to live up to your full potential and to move forward with your life, no longer allowing this heartache and pain to weigh you down.
I think that's so beautiful. It kind of reminds me of another story, Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah,
So,
perfect example.
Long story short, this woman was really hurt by Nazi soldiers. She wasn't a Jew, but she
was taken and put into a camp.
A concentration camp. And
Yep.
of course, just...
The vilest of living
Yes,
conditions.
like she suffered the worst by these, Nazi guards. And she actually preached of, forgiveness. And anyways, but it came to a point where she had to shake one of the guards' hands who had, quite frankly, just tortured her.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing. And in that moment, she was like, "Oh my goodness, like I don't know how to actually do this, And her secret to success was she relied on the Savior. And I want to draw this full circle. I think the surest way to rid your heart of resentment and to be able to forgive is you have to take it up with Him. And inexplicably, I think it's one of the greatest miracles that I've seen in my life, that pain and that sorrow will dissipate, and He will take it if you will let Him.
Mm-hmm.
He will take that pain and He will give you, the ability to forgive those who have wronged you. And I think that is just so beautiful. And, if you don't believe me, try it.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing that I was going to mention too, is that He will take your greatest sorrow, heartache, and weakness, and He will turn it into something beautiful, and He will turn it into a strength. There was actually a serial killer, and he killed, I want to say 10 people, 10 young women. And it was finally the day that he was going to be, he was on death row and he was going to be put to death. And so the family of the victims could come in and say their last words to him. And of these women, all of their family members just said horrible, horrible things to this serial killer, and he just stood there and took it. Never showed any sign of emotion. And then this big Santa Claus looking guy gets up and he goes, "Sir, you caused me more pain and anguish than I can ever express in words." And he says, "But the good Lord says that we need to forgive." And he's like, "It's taken me years to work through this and years to get to this point." He's like, "But I've taken my hate and anger and I've given it to Christ." And he's like, "I can honestly stand here before you today and say, I forgive you." And this serial killer wept because he finally felt the weight of the pain and the affliction that he caused to others. But I also would like to think that he felt the love that this man had for him, and more importantly, that the love the Savior has for him, even though he committed such horrendous acts. And that's what we're even saying. If you've experienced something so heart-wrenching and so difficult, there isn't a single person on this earth that can help you work through that. But there is one person that can, and that's Jesus Christ. And so if you have pain and sorrows that are too much for you to bear, he can help you.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to end this episode.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything better we could say.
Be a goldfish.
Be a goldfish.
And forgive.
And forgive. And recognize, you can rid your heart of resentment. And we hope some of these principles might speak to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for tuning in today. Please, if you loved this, hit the like button. Okay?
Subscribe.
Send it to other people that may be interested. We would really appreciate it.
Yes.
And until next time, keep partying, our friends.
Peace.
Peace. One thing we wanted to add that we forgot to mention is a perfect example of how you can rid your heart of resentment is follow the example of
Oh, she's eating the mic.
Winnie. Babies and toddlers. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've made countless mistakes as a father already, and they're only 6 months old, and they don't harbor a single one against me.
No, not even one time.
Not even one time.
They're just super nice.
Yeah.
Her sister's sleeping.
Yeah,
So
her sister's asleep.
that's why we're here.
The only other thing that I would mention too is toddlers are the same. They have a memory that's quick to forget things that cause them pain and heartache, and they quickly move on and forgive. So that's the one thing we want to leave you with.
Yes.
Be like goldfish, rid your heart of resentment, forgive, and be like our baby girl Winnie here.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Ooh.